I can't remember when I first said, "Hey, I'd like to interview you about the book," but it feels like 100 years ago now. And in that time, we've interviewed like all these different luminaries and bestsellers, and all these kind of household names of sales theory. But I've sort of been cherishing the idea that we're going to get back to this and have a chance to tackle a book that I read such a long time ago, and you gave me physically. Here you are, right, at my house. So yeah, I'm just delighted that we're doing this at long last. Okay, so I think maybe I can tee you up for it with magic. Why magical as opposed to any other things that you might have called it?
Magic refers to the results of what appears to come out when things are well done. So if you look at any product out there which is engineered well, we say it works like magic. Or even the magic tricks are really engineering at the back end. So in order to get what is a magical outcome, you got to engineer it very well. You got to know where the pieces are, you got to know how to arrange it, you got to execute it well along the way. So it refers to the results, but it also refers to the word magic, which is used as an acronym to talk about how to look at things in enterprise sales.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to draw out for folks who have seen us talk to a lot of different thinkers and writers on sales is you really have a core specialty around enterprise sales, and that's a different game. That is not your same game as kind of run-of-the-mill account acquisition, or certainly than B2C. So for the uninitiated, maybe can you just sort of talk about enterprise sales and maybe a word or two of your background?
Yeah. So normally when we talk about sales, the underlying phenomenon is really persuasion. You're trying to persuade to get somebody to do something. And if you do that one at a time, like you sell your consumer goods, for example, I'm selling you a television or a toothpaste or whatever that is, or a phone, then it is called B2C. So it's an individual decision maker, and you got to sell to them. So there are selling skills required there. But the reason why enterprise sales is considered a lot more complex and the next level is because it's a team sport kind of a thing. So you're not alone selling, and the buyer is not alone buying. That's what makes it complex. What it means is now, you have a team of people. You have people with technical knowledge. You have commercial knowledge, legal knowledge, whatever it is that takes your system to work well, whatever is your product or service, and fit it into something equally complex or more complex many times, which is there are multiple people within the team. They have different levels of skills. They have different levels of KPIs or agendas. And then there are different departments. Somebody's looking after the business outcomes. Somebody's looking after the functional outcomes, and somebody's looking after technical outcomes if you're in that part of the business. So in order to be able to navigate through all these, there are so many interconnections happening, and then there's competition. That's what makes it tough, and therefore you got to have a clarity and approach, the way you would look at things, the way you would look at the signals versus the noise, and the way you do it over a prolonged period of time. People quit sometimes. You've done 6 months of work or 9 months of work, and then somebody suddenly moves a different role, or there's a change of new year, or they just quit, or somebody new shows up, and a lot of things as a result change. And dealing with that is what is a little complex. And I happen to work in this space ever since my first job. This is where I ended up in my first job. So, so it's like more than 25 years, almost 25 years now. I've had the opportunity to sell into 30 different countries with a lot of team members from around the world. So I thought, why not put those learnings into it? And that's how this book came out.
Okay, 30 countries is a lot by any measure. Some people haven't sold 30 contracts, period, let alone 30 countries. But any particular favorite contexts for you in terms of just a great period of time or a great country or culture in which you just loved selling? Or maybe I'll give you a double, Raju, or just ones where you're like, I don't cherish that. I don't want to go back there.
See, actually, so sales, I look at it as an adventure. Every deal is different, right?
Mhm.
Even if you're the same person, you're selling the same product, even if you're selling it to the same company you've sold it to, there's a different flavor and variety at the end of it, right? For a variety of, sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. So that's what makes it exciting. So it's not boring. It's not like sitting and coding. Sure, there are exciting stuff with coding, for example, or building a skyscraper, etc. I'm sure there are skills attached to it. But this one is like everything you got to be on your toes. Otherwise, somebody is going to get you, back and get that deal for themselves, and you end up losing. So the part that I like about it is it keeps you alert. It keeps you on the edge, and it allows you to keep pushing boundaries, which is what I personally like to do. And this is a great career for people who want to do it. But if you have to enjoy it, you have to look at it as an adventure, and you got to look at it in like continuous course correction terms in order to get to where you want to be.
I think that's a really great insight for folks who might not understand the game of enterprise sales in particular. This business of a team sport means that in my own career as well, some of the folks who have just been sensational at this are superlative politicians. They know internally how to get, this fellow or that gal into the room, even though they haven't any time or attention or particular reward for being in there. And yet they can see that character's going to need to be at the table on a Wednesday at 3. So they figure it out. They use their art of persuasion there. And then in the next moment, they're turning, they're pivoting and they're doing the same with the client. It's like, oh, can't we get the CTO in there as well? And it's a joy to watch. And it is a difficult and honorable craft. On the edge is a great way to put it.
Yes, because so when you have a team sport, obviously you need to organize your side of the story. Okay, who does what? What happens if something works? Somebody's having an off day, or they're busy, or they're off, and those kind of things. You got to account for those, and then you got to fit that into what the customer is looking for. It's like two moving trains. So that's what puts you on the edge, and it's all wonderful. Now, it's obviously internal does not mean there is no selling happening. Okay, while it's internal and you're on the same side of the table, the top sales professionals know that whether it's internal or external, you're always in the convincing or persuading mode. You're selling. Okay, you're asking for a discount, for example, right? You're actually selling on why you should be in a position to sell that at that price or at those terms. Right? That's internal selling. Somebody is probably looking at margins, for example, or they're looking at something else, and you got to give it to them on what it is. And that's the skill of aligning the pricing available, for example, and convincing your own team to get on with it and close it in order to win the deal is also selling. So what you're really seeing is someone who's really good at it. I have not seen people who are really good only with customers and they're not good internally. Right.
Yeah.
So whoever is good externally, really good, they tend to be equally good internally while navigating their way through. Sometimes, you do have a behavior where, you focus a lot, you dress up well, you show up well, you prepare well for external, and the same bunch of guys probably sometimes ignore the fact that it's internal and they don't sell and they start telling. That's when they realize, hey, what's going on with my company? Why is this not happening, etc. So if you're in a sell mode externally, that's great, but you should also have a sell mode internally. You cannot just go telling. So this is something that as a behavior, we tend to drop our guard, but top sellers make sure that it's always selling.
Okay, let's get the pry bar out. Take it to the extent you can. Like, the truth is people need to buy the book and read it. But to the extent that you can you take people through the acronym?
Oh, yes. So I have put the book in sort of two buckets. They're all connected, but for logical purpose, they've been separated. The first one is, how do you look at things and how do you think about it, right? That's what is called MAGIC, okay? MAGIC, and I'll explain to you in a minute on what it stands for. But the purpose of this is, when you're looking at a deal, when you're looking at something, what is the way to look, what to look for? And how do you know to look for certain signals and ignore the noise or avoid the noise? That's what it is made for. So M stands for the people that you cover. It's called MAN, MAN. It's within itself, it's an acronym for somebody with money or authority or need for the product or service that you're talking to. So that M refers to the coverage of people that you need to speak with. Sometimes in small companies, all three can be one person, but in large companies, each M can be a bunch of people, A could be a bunch of people, and N could be a bunch of people. So that's what makes it exciting and complex and different all the time. So that's M, who you cover, right? The second one is A, alignment of what they're looking for with what you have to offer. And when I say alignment, think of it like this. You may be selling a drill bit, but your customer is buying a hole, right? So now you have to find that alignment between what you're selling. Usually a lot of people are good at it because it's your product, you've sold it 100 times, and therefore you know the features, you know the benefits, at least that's what you think you know in certain contexts, but then the context has to be aligned with what the customer is thinking of. If those holes are, for instance, holes in a wall, I want to just hang a picture, for example, that's different kind of holes versus you want to drill holes into the earth and get some oil out, for instance, right? And everything else in between, like industrials and so on and so forth. So you got to see the context, how many holes you're drilling, what's your current problem, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the alignment required, which is in my terms, technology alignment, in functional alignment, as well as the business outcome alignment. So that's what you need to look at with the money, with the authority, and with the need. So think of alignment and are you aligning? Spend some time there. If it's not aligned, it's going to generate friction. You might still win the deal, but it may not be an ideal kind of a thing with the level of profitability you do want, maybe a smaller contract, and those sort of things happen. So that's M, who you cover, and A is the alignment of those people's priorities with the offering that you have. Now, G stands for the ongoing activity, and it stands for growth, right? Growing the influence. So whenever you start engaging with any customer, you're likely to either know them very well because they're your existing customer, or you don't know them very well. You're meeting them for the first time, or you have a negative history. Right. You could be starting anywhere, and it's also a function of comparing with your competition. Maybe you're neutral, but your competition has been there, and they've been existing customer of that particular competitor. So now wherever you are, you need to start growing your influence in your account, right? If you're the leader, if you're in the pole position, sure, you want to continue to keep that lead and expand that lead. But if not, you want to bridge that gap with someone else, and then try to increase your influence so that you get to control the opportunity. So that's the growing of the influence in an account. And there's a way to look at it, and you got to see it. Like, you cannot say, hey, that's a bank and that's another bank, or that's that's a construction company and another construction company. It really depends on what your current level of influence is and knowledge is of that person. So you got to say, I'm starting at -10 and I'm going my way, and that sort of a thing. So that's growth of influence. The fourth one is I is inspection. Inspection, and inspection. That's very important. It's like driving. You got to keep your eyes on the road when you're driving. Somebody stops in front of you. It may not be because there's nothing wrong with you, but the other guy is drunk and he comes onto your line. There's going to be an accident. So you got to keep your course correction on, and that is inspection. The sooner you get that information, the easier it is for you to fix it. And then the last one is called C, which is context. Every time contexts keep changing, right? When something new comes up, like your customer is having a bad year, for example, or he's having a great year, for instance, he's got a deal somewhere and you need some software or some of your products to do it. Or, the context always changes, whether based on the competition, based on the people that you're talking to, etc. And it's always important to explain that context to everyone else in your team, and then align your resource allocation plan, etc. in that direction. Does that make sense? So that's the first part. I don't know if it's a long answer, but yeah, please go ahead.
No, it's the answer I was looking for. Keep going. Give us part two. I'm bookmarking a couple of questions I'm coming back to.
All right. So that stands for magic. How you look at things, what to look for, how do you separate noise from signals? That's it. That's the first part. The second part is on the book. I put it as 4 ACEs. It's supposed to stand for the actual execution. When you execute it, what do you look for? So theory is easy. Yeah, I got to cover this guy, that guy, that guy. But it's not going to be so straightforward because someone is a CEO of a company or a CIO or a CFO, whoever you're selling to, and it's not easy. So those 4 ACEs are representative of how do you go about executing and what do you look for while executing. So think of it. The first one is understanding the customer. Everybody knows this. You want to get to know what your customer says, what they're thinking, etc. So that part is clear. There are a list of questions there, a list of ways in which you can ask those questions or prod them to get to the root causes and all that. The second part is nothing but a validation of the first one. This is my secret sauce, if you would. That's what I try to do behind the scenes, is to make sure that that my understanding of the customer, according to the customer, is better than what my competitors understand the customer. Okay. So, I may be selling to Kevin and I think I understand Kevin fully, but Kevin thinks somebody else understands, Kevin's requirements than what I do. That's not good enough. So you have to be the one who customer thinks to understand their problems better than other vendors. Getting that is an execution skill. You got to do that. If you're number 2, there's no half price. There's no silver medal. Either you get 100 or it's 0. So the second ACE is to make sure that the customer knows that you understand them better than anybody else. The third ACE is for partnerships. Now, obviously, in enterprise sales, like I said, it's a team sport. So many times you may not have the skill, you may not have the next part of the piece of the puzzle that customer is trying to solve, and therefore it's always better to work with partners who have that skill. It could start from setting up appointments. Somebody else asks the person, they give you an appointment. If you ask, they don't give it to you. So that's what the partnership is. Similarly, other things that you can do with partners because they offer complementary support to your product and that sort of thing. So that's partnership. How do you plan for partners? What kind of partnerships do you work with? And how do you maintain and grow them so that they sell for you in your absence?
Yeah.
And so that's the third ACE. And the fourth one is equally important, which is called the win plan. Win plan is obviously when you want to have a deal, you have to have an approach of what is it that will play to your strengths and how you're going to win it. Are you going to give them a pay-per-use kind of a model, for example? Could be pricing or licensing kind of a construct if you are in the software, or you give them, even if you're a regular thing like pay per month or whatever those options are. Second, you offer proof of concepts, or you offer some volume-based constructs. You offer some terms, within your contract, etc. So you have to have a win plan. At what point in time, who covers who, and how do I get them across the line? How do I get them to my side versus the other side? Or how do I get them to, what are the problems that I will focus on, or the differentiators in my product that will stand out in this particular opportunity in order for me to win? So articulating that win plan is rare, to be frank. Most people are comfortable talking about their product and their differentiator, etc., as taught to them, which is fine. But making sure how you execute it, allocating resources, asking for help, and making sure that these things happen over a prolonged period of time, like several months or a few quarters, is where really the trick lies. And there are ways and means to have that plan. So that's the fourth, is the business plan, which is the 4 ACEs.
It's so much. I think so. So if I have a critique of the book, Raju, my critique is it's 5 books. And you can maybe what can happen actually is you give like addendums and extra readings off some of those chapters. I also should just note for some people who don't realize this, they'll see it if they go to magicalselling.com, but something like the win plan would be tough to bring into full life unless you have a Sherpa around to show you how it works. And that's stuff that you do, isn't it?
That's
For
right.
organizations who are trying to figure out like, okay, I get this win plan idea, but it'd be great to see 2 or 3 and how they work and how they come together. But you actually like take people through that, show them as part of your work.
Absolutely. That's the bread and butter of everything we do. Every day. There's no two ways about it. And win plans, let me simplify that, right? People know this instinctively, but if you want to put a framework, see, win plan is also dependent on the kind of products you carry. If your win plan could be, I'll simplify it into 3 categories just for discussion's sake. The first one is if you're a dominant player, okay? You're the market leader by a long distance, and there are cases in which that happens. You're well known. Nobody gets fired for buying your stuff, and so on and so forth. That's called the dominant plan of attack. So you go there, play the frontal attack, and get that. So that's a direction you take for the win plan. Now, on the other spectrum, you were born yesterday, literally. Let's say last year or last month, you started a new company, or you just launched a product that nobody knows or nobody has heard of. So therefore, your plan is going to be that of, or even you're not a market leader for sure. You're one of the players far away. Now, if you find in that way, you have to approach this like a guerrilla warfare. Got to stay underneath the radar for as long as possible, so that nobody shoots you because you're not visible to start with. Okay, that's number one. Second, you use the market leaders' ability to educate and evangelize, etc. But you go in, and where they're not paying attention, you're mobile and they're slow. You can change your contracts. That's the guerrilla warfare tactic that you do if you're on the other side of the spectrum, right? And in the middle, there is a sort of a Me Too strategy, wherein there are 10 others who can do the same. Nobody dies if you buy this or that, but people still make decisions. So the way to approach that is neither guerrilla warfare nor dominant market position, but go through with it with the second ace that I mentioned, which is get the customer to make sure that they think you know it better than your competition. So that's the game plan there. That makes sense?
It totally does. So I'm actually going to bookmark that one because that was one of the ones I want to come back to. But first, inspection, right? I just going back to the magic acronym. I think when I speak to and listen to very senior salespeople, and not only people who are good at the craft, but who have stood back to study it and teach it, as you have, they almost never are satisfied with the degree to which they talk about the need to just watch and observe and take a very precise, careful note of what's going on. And that usually therein lies huge ways to just unlock brand new deal configurations, brand new dollar value on contracts, sometimes brand new product lines. But can I just invite you to go back and say a few things about inspection?
Oh, yes. My favorite storyline here is that when, in, I think 69 or something, when they were planning the rocket to the moon, you would know that, obviously we know where the moon is going to be, where's the Earth, where's the location, etc. So it should be easy to fire it because it's all driven by computers. But the reality is that 96% of the time, that particular rocket was not on track and it required course corrections. Only 4% of the time, because there's wind changes, there's weather, there is a lot of things that happen as a result of which things keep moving. So inspection is like that course corrections, right? And in sales, if I bring it down to sales, I look at it as and people in sales are familiar with this, is good news is no news, right? Yes. And no news is bad news, and bad news early is good news, right?
Yes.
Now, what it means is, if it's good news, yeah, it's okay, you can give it to me later, right? But if you know that there's somebody moving and there's something else going on sooner, that's intel, right? So it's
Yeah.
about paying attention. So you're inspecting for this kind of information all day long, right? So let's say, there's a presentation that you decided, hey, I'm going to make my first pitch, and here's the team, and you prepared well. You want to know what the hell is happening in that meeting, along the meeting. So imagine people messaging you, hey, so far it's a day-long session that we have, a 3-hour session we have. For the first hour, there were 6 participants, and they had like 12 questions, for instance. Okay, so now you know that, and you could guide them, you could do all those kind of things, assuming you're able to message and so on and so forth. So you're looking for what, and here's what you're looking for at every step. What could be the outcome of that particular activity, meeting? There could be more than one. What you don't want the outcome to be, so you want to be careful of avoiding that sort of stuff. And in an ideal world, what should be the outcome of that particular meeting? So smart people keep looking at this all the time and assume that 96% of the time, the sales, there's no reason why it is 96%. I'm just, bringing in that rocket analogy from space. And
Yeah.
it's very similar. I feel it the same way, even if I don't have the exact metrics. But the point I'm trying to say is you're going to look for every meeting at every stage, what could be the ideal way, what is it that you don't want it to be, and in an ideal world, what it should be. And
I just want to,
and that allows you to do course corrections. Sorry, you're saying something.
so many of the themes and the insights in your book touch each other, and I think one of the profound lessons on inspection connects to teamwork, which is that when you get a big enterprise account, one human being is not enough to whip around and have all those coffee meetings and check all those documents and, inspect every little tributary and stream that runs into a deal. And so I think some of that coordination activity is asking, Jeff from tech to make sure that he finds out when he's meeting with Tracy, fact A or B. And I know you and I worked together to support this systems integrator that we did some support for, and that's just such an easy kind of example that would describe so many enterprise deals where it's not just that you're Mr. Inspector or Miss Inspector, but that you have to actually coordinate a whole inspection ensemble from your side of the table.
Oh, absolutely. So it's like when you say inspection, it's like one is, of course, your level of inspection. If you are in charge of the sale, for example, that's number one. But at the same time, like I said, it's a team player, right? So they also need to imbibe this inspection mindset into whatever it is that they're doing, and make sure if something goes wrong or not as planned, give it to someone else who can right the wrong. And whenever it happens, and the sooner it is, so that's when that's how teams help each other. If you do not say, hey, this meeting didn't go well, but I did my stuff and I left it there, it's not a check mark. The check mark is when the feedback comes back on if you did something in this particular manner, then certain other things will happen as a result. That's where your intelligence comes into the picture. Like if you're convinced, then you're going to get a meeting with the economic buyer, for example. Okay. If you have a strong champion and you convince them, you went out for a coffee and you made sure that all messages or everything is taken care of. But then if he's a good champion, the next outcome for you to inspect is that he or she will get you to the decision maker, economic buyer. Now, if that doesn't happen, and it's not whether you've given your message or not. It's possible that somebody has given a better message, or it was off mark and they didn't understand, or something's wrong. Maybe the guy is dehydrated when he was listening and probably not paying attention. A lot of things is possible, right? This is what we do when you inspect. You look at the person that you're talking to. And personally, if I'm in person, I try to look for these kind of things. Like if somebody's sick, for example, right? you don't, or somebody is getting disturbed all the time because they have a quarter end or some other fire that's going in. So you got to pull back, because it's not sufficient. Hey, I had a meeting and you better come up and show up and listen to me. All these things are a part of inspection in one way or another. And then it calls for, a sensible, practical, smart reorganizing of that schedule, for example, to get back, because things happen. And my favorite thing is like, are you hydrated? If you're hydrated, you behave differently versus not. And that's an important skill to have.
That's I don't know if that one's going to make an entire book because it's such a pithy insight, but it better make a blog post.
There are quite a few tells, quite a few signals that you look for, and top sellers, just like what you do in poker, right? People look for those signals, and people play based on that. Now, the amateurs typically play the hand that they're dealt with, right? If you've got a great hand, if you're a market leader, if you're a great company, or you just had the right things doing, sure, that's a great hand, and you maximize your thing. But that has its limitations. So the real poker players will tell you that they're playing the person sitting across them, and not necessarily just the hand. Although you got to play the hand, but that's only a small part of it. And playing the person in front of you is far more important. So that's the real skill that you want to apply. And then suddenly things like, hey, you can persuade people like magic. No, it's really observation, and it's really planning and executing on the spot.
Yeah, boy, what a great reason to explore your closed lost deals with some detail as well. Can I share a couple of the tells that I learned when I was selling investment primary research to investors?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
One of them would be the difference between, I'm going to pass this to my general counsel, Trevor, to take a look at, versus I'm going to pass this to legal to look at. So if they named that GC or that legal person, that was a very strong signal that, this is something that intends to be done. They don't need to tell me that person's name, and yet there it was. And when they didn't, it was a good heuristic that maybe this was going to be their kind of gentleman's way out. Like, I don't want to tell you no, Kevin, but I'll let legal, or the wave of the hand at something legal, be the reason that it died in process. And so we added the bit of, can I know who that is? And then if you definitely didn't get a name at that point, it was like, ooh, this thing's down to 50-50 now. And I never could have guessed that. We had to learn that one on our own. But it was one of those little tells, like a poker table tell. It wasn't 100% guide point, but it sure was strong guidance. When somebody says, my general counsel, Stephen, Kowalski, is going to look at this, like, that guy's going to look at it for sure. And when they say, we'll pass it to legal, who knows? Who knows? It might not even go there.
Yes, so precision is one of the inspections you do. You look for precision. Okay, so if it's all English and it doesn't have, say, the names, for example, or the place or the time or the activity, then that it's in the air, probably work in progress. And therefore, you got to find a way to handhold or make sure you follow up or do whatever it is in order to do that. It's not going to happen on its own, right? That's one part. The second part of that, recently last year we had another customer, and they, what we looked at is, hey, can we do this and can we do that? They bought into it, and we know they can get it done. But now the second part of any deal is also urgency, right? Sure, they'll probably get it. But if there is no urgency and it's your quarter end or year end, and you want to really get that sorted out, now what will happen here is that you also start noticing people, what would happen. Okay, so think of it like, okay, I'm now okay. This will take 6 weeks from memory and from experience, etc. So let's spend the next 6 weeks. But then you got 2 weeks to do it or 3 weeks to do it, and now you're saying, hey, can we do that? And they're saying, hey, I don't see a way how that happens. Because of my process in this procurement or legal or whatever it is. Now, what we then work, now in those cases, it's not a lost deal, but it's probably they need some propellers behind them to try and move this along. In which case, the look, what we did was, and this was a particular use case, actually less than 12 months ago, last November, we agreed on this deal and we wanted the deal in December. And they said, look, we can give this to you in January. And we were like, all right, why don't we do this? Let's not assume how much time you take or some other person takes or some other person takes. Whenever it goes to the next person, we just work with them to move it sooner, a little bit sooner. Maybe the person usually takes 6 days. I'll try to get that done in 4 days instead, right? Things like that, we'll prep them. But let's not think of all the 5 steps, one step at a time. And then it worked out. On the 28th of December, we managed to close that opportunity. It's one of the good stories. Not everything ends up there. But the point is that, whenever these precision is missing, that means either they're not strong enough and they're just managing you, because people don't want to have unpleasant conversations instinctively, most of them. Whereas the other one is they're sold and they'll get it done, but they don't have enough control on getting that process through, in which case it's always better to give a helping hand without leaving everything to be done by them. You try to bring them and use yourself or some other person in order to get to where you want to be.
Second question, the one I want to come back to, because I feel like a number of your readers will nod and say, absolutely, absolutely. But this is a very hard piece of religion to practice. So you can just sit in the pew and go, and agree. But here's a hard thing to do. Get your client to the place where they're convinced that you know them better than anybody else knows them, your competitors, for example. Okay, we have to pull that apart a little bit because there's at least 2 people's mindsets in that piece of advice. There's your own activity and your own perception, but there's also your assessment of their perception. So I think if I hear you right, it's not good enough to feel like you've put in a lot of effort and you probably know the client better than the next guy who's going to pitch them. Actually, you need to somehow do a bit of validation, and you need to take a good solid measure of that client and how they perceive you versus, anybody else coming to pitch something similar.
Yes.
That's tricky stuff. That's pretty advanced maneuvers, I think.
Yes, it is. And here's how, people can approach it. Whoever wants to try this out is, it's not that sellers don't do this. They again know this instinctively, but they may not be planning it and executing it consciously. Is that, now think of what people do in your daily life when they know that you understand them better than others. Okay. They tend to be open, a lot more open. Okay. They tend to feed you back regularly. So it's going to be a 2-way street. That you ask a question, they won't keep quiet because they think you are useful and you understand them better. They tend to give those answers back honestly and frequently, and mostly to the point. So it's never 100%. I wouldn't expect that. But these are some of the tells to say, hey, they're warming up to us. Okay, they're giving me that feedback. And the third tell is the precision. And at some point, they will use that as a, so take a look at the level of depth to which they take you, for instance. So any product that you're selling is somebody who's using it, for technology, for example. And they say, hey, I do it this process in this particular way in 8 different steps. I'd like to do that in 2 different steps. Okay, so that's a good. The more precision they bring to the table, the more they know that they trust you, and therefore they're sharing that information with you because they think you can come out with an answer and you can help them. So they're going to be upfront. So that's number 1. Now, when you dig deeper on that, okay, who gets to benefit from these things as a result of using this technology, for example? Right now, you can say, all right, if I do this from 8 steps to 2 steps, it changes the KPIs of the people that are in the function. Could be the finance, could be the technology, could be the business user, marketing, whoever it is. And at that point, you will now start seeing that leverage coming from your technical teams, because now they're talking to each other and they're giving you that information back, not only for their department and for their work, but the connected department and how they look for it and so on. So that's a second tell that happens. And further deep in complex organizations, and this is very important, if that connection is not made, then you have a showstopper at some point, and you'll be lucky if that doesn't show up towards the end and doesn't stop you. So which means ultimate business goal, for example, is either to do revenue generation or cost cutting or compliance or new product development or customer success. So it has to connect to that. So when you are able to get that pieces of information, because one, you are curious and you're asking those questions and you're maneuvering to those people who have those answers, and then you're stitching it up together. When you go and meet like 4 different people, you're stitching it back and say, hey, if you do this, it connects to that in this way and the other way in the other angle. Now you're giving them a full picture and they feel a part of it. So that's how you build that use case. That's how you grow the influence among the people that you're talking to within an organization. And that's where you then assess that, and you'll recall, right? It could be your friend or it could be your colleague who shares with you a lot of things, because you go a long way. That kind of engagement starts happening to a limited extent. And that's when you know that they think you know better, and they start giving you intel on the competition. But those guys are doing this. Can you tell me how to overcome that? That's the final piece of the puzzle, when they say, hey, that competition is saying they can do these 3 things, and it is not generic, right? Not like, hey, tell me how you compare with them. Say that, hey, this is the one that they're doing. I want you to fix this in order to get this out. So that's when you can tell. A combination of these things will happen, and the depth to which it happens depends on complexity of the deal itself, and that you're on the right track with that particular part of having customer know that you understand them better than the competition.
I sort of want to make a quick annotation here for those who have listened to a lot of our interviews and tracked some of the luminaries in sales. This really is at the heart of what some of those great theories like sense making and the challenger sale and the jolt effect and so forth are getting at, which is if you can get to that place with a customer that you're describing, Raju, you've checked a bunch of other boxes. I mean, they now
Correct.
Trust that you understand their business. They now have given you enough trust that they're clearly enfranchising you in the conversation, because you're never getting to the place that you describe until you have a true like interviewers, interlocutors conversation relationship formed. You're never getting to that place that you describe unless you've passed many of those milestones already.
That's correct. And there are many tricks to do that. There's challenger sales, there's others. I've heard of them. Many of them that are like, you can find any number. But it's really, now when you're a seller, now you're thinking, whoever is that person. Now again, each play is different. Different people are at different levels. If you're talking to a rocket scientist and if you're selling some technology, there's a little bit of a limitation, especially if you're new in the job and so on. But if you have this North Star, that I want to get to that place, now you're going to do from within your current position what needs to be done to go directionally in that direction. Could be some questions from one selling, there's Sandler, there's Challenger, there's many others. I don't have a preference one over the other. They're all good and they work in their own context. But the point is, you feel free to use the tool that you like. Okay. You need a hammer, go with the hammer. Okay. You need a plier, go with the plier. Doesn't matter, but you need to get to that. You're a screwdriver, for example. But if you use a hammer instead of a screwdriver, 1 or 2 times you might be able to pull it off, but that's not the smart way of doing it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. A screwdriver to pound in a nail is not really going to, it's not an inspiring image.
Yes.
Here's a question for you. The way that you've thought through this and pinned it down and laid it out, it obviously is going to come from the richness of your own experience. What do you think if, let's say a senior lawyer is reading your book and thinking, well, how do I sell my legal services? That's a different thing than a massive enterprise account, from the software company. What do you think is applicable? What do you think isn't when they read your work?
Yes. So a few things are definitely applicable. It's just that it's a more elaborate system. That's all.
Mhm.
So you may not need an elaborate system for everything, right? Let me put it this way. I mean, if you want to go next door, probably you should take a bicycle, and not because you have a plane there. You want to do around, right? If you want to cross 10,000 miles, of course, a plane is better than a car, because even if it's the best car on the planet, you don't want to do that. And so therefore, it's like horses for courses. The way you want to
Yeah.
look at it is really one person. It's called the buyer-centered approach. Now, anyone who's a lawyer, or in fact, there's somebody. Now that you mention, I'm reminded of 3 years ago, I was talking to a lawyer for a certain contract. And I did tell him that I'm coming out with this book as a part of our regular conversation. And he did say that, look, I want to be able to do that because nobody knows how to do this. Because mostly what people lack here is that in sales, they should recognize that it's a rejection business. Okay. You talk to 10 people, all 10 are not going to jump up. It's not like a client who's already come to you and then you're trying to sell them. That's a transaction, right? If
Yeah.
customers know what to buy, and they've decided on that, they've used it before, that's a transaction. So most lawyers tend to be comfortable with that because somebody reaches out and they have a problem and they want to solve. So that's a transaction. But if you want to go out and convince people, you got to understand the problem that they're trying to solve and what is the value of that problem to them. If it's a $2 problem, you cannot charge them $20. Right? And if it's a $2 million problem, you can get away with a much higher fee than 100, 200, 300K, because it's a much bigger problem you're solving. So you have to connect the problem to its value and then provide a solution to that. The cure cannot be more expensive than the problem itself. So you got to be careful of that. Just because you know how to do it, like for example, when I do some of these trainings, for example, they just want some 1 hour to do a deal review and then just walk away. That's fine. Now, you don't charge $1 million for that. But there are times where you say, my company has got like 500 sellers and I want to improve. That's going to be a large one. So you have to see that context and then put accordingly. And then you tend to get it. Now, the third one at a higher level is called consultative, when the customer or the prospect has not realized that the problem exists. So that's where you approach with a consultative thing. Hey, you don't seem to know this problem, but you know what? You're spending 1 hour doing something which I can do in 3 minutes, for example, for whatever reason. Oh, okay. So is it available? Yeah, but I have this 1 hour. Why do I care? So you now need to, do consult them, uncover the needs, etc. So if you're a lawyer, very simple. Look at the person, understand the problem, and then horses for courses. Give a solution that is not over the top for them, and that's where you start.
There's another interesting element. I think we just were touching on it. We're talking about like closed lost deal reviews and how experience builds the eye for tells and things like this. I think this business of really knowing the customer and knowing that they know that you know them better than everybody else who's courting their favor. Even if that doesn't serve you for the win on the deal in front of you, boy, is that ever useful for the longer game. So I think what I'm saying, Raju, is your approach is especially powerful in series. So if it's not just like a one-time shot, you sell to this person across the table or you don't, and that's that. But if you are going to see them again and again over the next decade, boy, does it ever really pay off with redoubled value in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. And this is very important, right? So one is, of course, the deal, right? For that particular deal, you do certain thing. But what you're doing in this case, even in some cases, if you fail doing that, but the customer could see it, they tend to become your advocates. Okay, that's very important, right? Even if you don't close the deal, if you don't understand, or if you understand and then realize, because what happens is, if sometimes even if you understand them, you know very well that you don't have the solution for it, right? They're really solving something else, and
Yes.
it might just be that you understand them very well, but you don't have it, and you just walk away saying, hey, you know what, I don't solve this problem, I'll get you a friend to do it, he's the best at it, and you walk away. So you didn't have it, but what you now have is the byproduct of that approach, which means
Yes.
the person you spoke with is your advocate. The next time they're going to think through, you know what, I want to find out what this guy has to say. Okay. And then they tell you the truth, which gets you stronger and makes you understand them better. And it's a virtuous cycle that starts, creating itself. I had a couple of these things. Now, every seller has some of these customers. I did have. So I was purely into software at some point in time. And one of my guys called up, this was in Indonesia, and said, hey, this particular, and we were working with a partner who was totally competitive product seller, and all those kind of things. And we worked with them over a period of time to get them to work with us as opposed to our competitors, right? And then one of those days, I got this call from my guys, and he says, hey, this partner wants to talk to you. I said, what is it about? And he wants to talk about this piece of hardware and how to position it, etc. I said, why don't you tell him that I'm not a hardware guy, and the person that whatever I say will be, sure, I can call it common sense and whatever, but I really don't know what I'm talking about. So he said, no, he trusts you more on understanding how to look at things and how to approach the negotiation if they don't know it, and so on and so forth. It's a sort of a decision-making criteria, or the risk mitigation criteria that customers talk to you about, even if you're not the subject matter expert. That's what being an advocate changes it to.
That's very powerful stuff. One of the disappointing pieces of news for younger folks in the sales profession is some of that just takes time. You just need reps. You just need to be in 40 meetings with the same client, and then you earn it. You can certainly be in 40 meetings with a client and not earn it, but there's no option of getting there with 5-10 meetings. But it's powerful stuff once you get there.
Absolutely. You start operating at a different orbit.
Yes, that's right. Unsurprisingly, the time has just flown by. I'm really glad we did it. But the final question really is, where should people go, Raju, if they want to find you? And I'll put an extra nudge. Can you say a couple of things about the range of things you do? So you didn't just author a book that's good that people should read. You're available for some more practical work, whether that's advice or teaching or more practical exercises as well. So can I just give you a shameless platform to kind of spruik yourself and your services and your book in the lot, and tell people where to find you?
Definitely, you can find me through my LinkedIn, or you can find me through the website. That's one. Typically, you could be a professional trying to improve your own career on what needs to be done, how to do it. That's one part that I can help with. The second one is what I'm coming out with this new system called buyer-centered system for sales, called 6 Dimensions of Magical Selling. Part of it is already in the magical selling, but I'm calling it 6 dimensions, and the difference is the buyer-centered. Now, I'm just testing it out in one of the countries in Southeast Asia. They want to license that part, sub-license it, and make sure we can do corporate training to organizations. So that's one of the things that's going on. The website will be revamped, etc., based on how this goes. It's an experiment. I want to get it right. If it gets it right, then we'll scale out for the rest of the world. But that's something that I'm doing. And then the third one is really about helping organization expand their sales directly, sales ecosystem. Meaning not sitting and telling you from outside the court, but I get on the court, play with you in order to help you build that ecosystem. Because enterprise sales is ultimately a play of sales ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
It's just not your sales, others get to sell it and others get to make their careers on it, make money on it, etc. So therefore, there's a way to do that sort of thing, which I had an opportunity to do it multiple times in a variety of contexts, both from a stronger position as well as weaker position. So that gives a little bit of perspective on do's and don'ts. So those are, I want 10 logos for you to help me close in this region, for example, right? I want an X amount of money that needs to be generated. I want to have these many partners to come online. All those things also as a service, but that's the sales as a service. Now, sales training, the sales coaching and mentoring for corporate, improving sales performance. And the third one is sales as a service. Just get in the field and do it with the boys.
Yeah.